Welcome, everyone, to a very, very special episode of Restorative Justice on the Rise. A little bit of history about RG on the Rise, as it's often known or referred to. We are considered the first podcast of its kind, but I want to put a disclaimer in there that Troy Williams of Restorative Media, who spent 23 years in prison, including the latter years long term in San Quentin, was doing equal podcasting work from the inside while Restorative Justice on the Rise was getting going at the very same time, 2010, 2011. So in at the very outset of podcasting, we had the privilege, and still do to this day, of giving the mic back to the people. We're unique because we've always invited in public audiences, whereas most podcasts are pre-recorded. We love doing public work. We've offered panels. We've collaborated with CNN and Van Jones on a very special series called The Redemption Project. We've had the privilege of going to HBO studios in New York for premieres, and we are very honored to stand for the grassroots voice globally of the restorative justice and related movements. So, again, I'm Molly Rowan Leach. I founded this podcast as a result of seeing what happens when we don't have community centered, citizen centered justice as our primary mode of offering voice and real senses of justice in our world, and the harm that it perpetuates on all the levels that we know and are discovering. So, thank you for being with us for this very special episode featuring the Circle Keepers. Circle Keepers is an extraordinary organization. Their website is thecirclekeepers.com. They have a lot of activated events and both web and on the ground based out of New York City, but they also have a lot going on that's influencing people worldwide thanks to technology like this. So we want to welcome in not just the amazing co-founder and director of the program today, Martine Urbach, but also four extraordinary youth keepers, excuse me, three, representing the team at Circle Keepers. So we're going to start out today by offering each person a chance to introduce themselves. And I'm also wanting to honor and thank my co-host today and intern of Restorative Justice on the Rise, Logan Ward, who is an award-winning documentarian responsible for the incredible groundbreaking and award-winning film that launched earlier this year, Remarkable, giving voices back to the trans community. So, Logan, why don't we start with you, and then you can pass to the Circle Keepers team.
Hi, I'm Logan Ward, and Molly has been training me in restorative practice, and but I've never participated in a circle before, and so I'm excited to hear all of your perspectives and experience. And I use he, him pronouns, and I live in Boston, so I'm so I've been working remotely with Molly and have been really grateful for technology and everything that it allows us to do. So I will pass it to Josiah, who on my screen is directly left of me, so going in a circle here.
Hi, my name is Josiah. I'm a youth fellow at the Circle Keepers, and I have just finished up eighth grade. Whoop whoop! And I will be going to high school this coming fall. And I think this is a great experience, and I'm excited to be here today.
Go
I
ahead,
think I'll
Elaine.
pass it on to Elena.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you, Josiah.
Sorry. My name is Elena Williams. I'm also just graduating eighth grade with Josiah. Um, I really love the Struggle Keepers program. It has taught me so much. As I have a father who was an immigrant, coming from St. Vincent, and a mother who was from Puerto Rico, which has now become a very big topic. Um, and yeah, so Circle Keepers has always been a very big guiding light for me.
Mm, thank you.
And I'll pass it on to Orla.
Thank you, Elena. Hi, my name is Orla. I go by she, her pronouns. I just finished my senior year of high school, so I'm going on to Hunter College in the fall. I joined the Circle Keepers just over a year ago, or just under a year ago, and I'm really happy to be here. And I'll pass it on to Martine.
Hey all, my name is Martine and my pronouns are he, him. And I am so excited to be here. I've learned and continue learning so much from Molly and from Restorative Justice on the Rise. I think one of my first experiences learning about RJ was um, through the mailing list many years ago. And so I'm really excited. I'm blessed. And yeah, these young people have been a huge part of my life. We've been a huge part of each other's lives over the last year, and we are going to continue with our Circle Keepers Fellowship year 2 coming up soon. I'm excited to. We went from having middle school and high school connected to having now high school and college. We'll see. We've never done that before. We're always learning. Yeah, and I'm going to pass it back to Molly.
So you might notice maybe that I'm smiling ear to ear and I'm nodding a lot. And for those listening on the podcast, you may not see that. But the reason is that it is one of the most wonderful and rewarding things to sit back and witness the inception of a program that is wrapped around a very good, important, critical, urgent, overdue intention of diversity, equity, inclusion, restorative justice principles and values enacted. And honestly, Martine and y'all, that's what I would imagine others in the world in this field, and you're getting noticed way beyond the field for cross-pollination in the New York area, for activism, for creativity and expression. I noticed that there's a lot of music and music that's brought into street events, probably music in circle. And so I would love to first open up, if we could, with a round, and you can pass just like in a circle, or you can speak in. And we can keep the order that Martine offered, or I'm okay with popcorn if you are. But what is your superpower, or what is the circle keeper's superpower in restorative practices? You can do both, or one or the other, or pass. I know I just spoke to my view from the outside.
So
So
let's go to Elena. So let's do Elena, Josiah, Orla, Martine, and Logan, and then you.
Would it be possible for you to repeat the prompt?
sure. What do you feel your superpower is in restorative practices? What's your unique gift you bring? Or what have
Mm,
you maybe heard other people share that they really love about how you are with them that helps them to open up and be able to be themselves? Or what do you think the circle keeper's superpower is?
well, that's a great question first. And second, I think that personally, I bring a lot of personal experiences to the table in the sense that when I communicate with others, I really like to be able to connect and find similarities or find, something that we can both have a conversation about. And especially in such a big place like New York, it's such an awesome experience to be able to like, share what I've gone through or share other experiences. But I think that with the circle keepers, it's such a shared effort in the sense that everybody brings something new and different to the table, and you'll never see two repeating things. It's always something new. And I think that's one of the things that's so special about the program. It's that there are so many factors that play into like how big a part like the circle keepers plays in our society today, although it may not be the most visible. But yeah.
Thank you, Elena. Anyone else?
It's Michael, right? Yes. And I would like to add, on to the question, and it is a great question, and I would like to add on to Elena and how she said, I think it's important to have the connection. Connection is kind of like a great thing to have in any conversation, and especially in restorative justice and how you introduce it into communities. It's great to have that connection and understand each other onto a deeper level and understand, that you're coming from different backgrounds, different areas in life, and different you're coming from different uprisings. Some may be less fortunate than others. So I think having that connection builds on that on that connection, kind of talking with each other and understanding each other is definitely great to have, because you have to understand that if you're not connecting with one another and you're not understanding each other, you're not going anywhere. So I think you have to understand that. Yes.
So, I'd say I think there are two superpowers to the Circle Keepers. The first one, I'd say, is community outreach. So Martine makes us do a lot of like workshops. We had our annual conference recently. We do block parties, like all these kinds of community events where we get to like talk to people and like introduce ourselves, say, hey, we're the Circle Keepers, we exist. And this is why you should care about us and what we're fighting for. So I think as a group do a really good job at that. And the second one would be youth leadership, because we always get to develop these workshops ourselves. We get to plan our events. So we really get to get put in that position of, decision making where youth might not traditionally have that. In the Circle Keepers, it is like the integral part of our programming. I'll pass it to Martine.
Oh, thank you all. Um, I tend to not think of things of like superpowers, but I really love the question. Um, I think that something that like we as a group do really well is that like we spend so much time like in circle that we actually the circle practice becomes the curriculum, and the circle becomes the pedagogy, and also the circle becomes the like the deliverable. Like a lot of times like people ask me like, oh, like you're not using chart paper, or they're not taking notes, or like they don't have like the booklets or whatever. And so I think that because we spend so much time just in circle listening to each other, like to be honest, like also struggling with each other, um, that we build a reality in which we can just practice being in circle with one another and practice not getting it perfectly, like practice failing at it and practice not being good at it, because I think that we tend to expect that unless we can do it perfectly and unless we can do it really good, it's not worth doing. And I think that in what the most beautiful things that we do is that we actually just do it. Like we do the thing, and it's flawed and it's messy and it's connecting, and at the end of the day it's like youth led. And it would be it would be a different thing if it wasn't. And I think that our superpower is actually staying committed to being who we are and staying committed to being with each other. um yeah, and it's beautiful to hear the young people reflect that.
Thank you, Martine. I saw Josiah's signal go up. Did you have something that you wanted to add, Josiah? I don't mean to put you on the spot at all. I just saw your hand go
Wait,
up and I thought maybe it was like you had something to add to that.
no, I'm sorry. I was just coughing. I'm sorry.
No, 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 no,
I'm
no,
sorry
no,
about that.
no. Here we are
Sorry.
on Zoom. And speaking of, yeah, we roll in the beauty of life. So um yeah. So what I'd like to do is come back for a moment. I feel remiss that I didn't get a chance to frame us and ground us for our listeners in a title for today's episode. And that is The Youth Are Not the Problem. The Youth Are the Solution. Toward healing and restoration in schools by youth and for youth. And a little bit more about the Circle Keepers, if you don't mind, I'd like to share. The Circle Keepers is a Brooklyn-based nonprofit organization. We dismantle the school to prison pipeline by training youth organizers as restorative justice practitioners, participatory action researchers, and socially conscious activists. By centering the lived experiences of youth leaders, we promote peacemaking through cultural and educational community organizing that heal the harms of racial segregation in schools and perhaps in life itself. But that's for you to share. So, as we dive into this next round, how about we talk about unity across divides? How do we actually achieve that, in your opinion, and lived experience? And what does unity mean to you?
If it's okay, I just want to like answer that real quick. That's why I'm smiling so much. It's just like I'm hearing like the whole description of like what like I've been working towards for the past like couple months that I've spent with the circle keepers, and it's just like so amazing to hear it out loud. Um, and it serves as a reminder of how lucky I am to participate in the program. I think that unity is so important for everybody because I think that to kind of build off of what Josiah and Orla were saying earlier, you cannot build connection without unity, and I think that um, unity is such a hard thing to define because unity means different things for every single person, right? Because unity can mean having this in common or doing this together because this is what we fight for. And this is what the Circle Keepers is essentially about, right? We're fighting for something, just like you said, we are trying our best and our hardest to dismantle the school to prison pipeline. And we find we find people that we can connect with and we can unify with so that we can all feed into this one big goal, right? And I think that that goal is essentially to make sure that every kid and even every adult is listened to, heard, and understood. Because that's not a fair case if that's not represented, right? There are so many cases in which people are shut down automatically because they hear a word or a sentence, but it's not fair. And that I feel is what the circle keepers do to strive to do in our daily, just go about our life because it's so important to be in unison.
Very, very beautifully articulated. Thank you.
I'm sorry, but can you repeat the question? I'm sorry. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
No, 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 no. It's okay. I tend to ask loaded questions that are long-winded. So, in a nutshell, how do we unify across divides? What's
Mm,
important to you?
okay.
What have you lived to the opposite, even if you would like to share?
Wow. I feel like that kind of is like it's a lot of I feel like divides kind of means a lot to me. So I'm kind of like gonna say what I thought when it first came to mind. I think that, since we are Brooklyn based, organization, although we do work outside of Brooklyn and we work in Queens and we work in Manhattan and we work all over the place and all over New York City, even outside of New York City and outside of New York State. But I feel like we all unify together as one, as coming from that interest of restorative justice and coming together with the interest of restorative justice and introducing it into schools as not just schools, actually in the world generally, because we're not just fighting to get into schools. That is our main objective, but we're not just fighting to get it in schools. We're trying to get it into our actual justice system and we reapproach how we see the justice system and we reapproach how we bring justice to people. And I think that, some aspects of the justice system are really effed up if we think about it, because if, you know, restorative justice isn't just looked at like, oh, it's just there to kind of not give the person that's guilty consequences. You know, it's there to reassure that person and give them a chance, a fighting chance of, kind of, it's giving them a second chance and it's giving them the chance to realize what they've done was wrong in some ways, not completely wrong, but it was wrong in some ways, and give them that chance to, kind of make up for the mistakes. So I think that's how, we all come together as one with restorative justice.
I really like how you put that, Josiah. That's really good. Um, but when I heard the question, the first thing I thought about was MSF and how they kind of, work on both sides of the conflict. And I think when we're, taking into consideration the divide between people, not only in our city, not only in our state, but across our country, I think we should always be focusing on number one, taking care of our people. So no matter if you're in a red state or you're in a blue state, um, it's you always need to get the same, um, you need to be taken care of in the same way. Um, and you need to be be just taken care of, taken care of. Um, and when we think about restorative justice, no matter if you support restorative justice in schools and you think that's something we definitely need, or maybe you're more hesitant on the idea and you don't think it's entirely effective, um, we still need to make sure that all of our students are getting those mental health resources, that all the students have the right to choose what kind of support that they get in their schools, um, and just make sure that we are, even though we are different and we have different beliefs, that we are still all being um, taken care of.
Mm.
Thank you, Orla. I mean, all of y'all are sharing such beautiful things. Um, you know, um, being a public school teacher, for as long as I have, will teach you a lot of lessons specifically around like commitment and also like around like choosing to stay in relationship. And I feel like it wasn't until really not that long ago that I learned that actually one of the most beautiful things that we can do for not only for ourselves but for each other is to day in and day out choose to stay in relationship or choose to end relationships. And I think that part of what I think restorative justice has done for me is given me not just like language, but also the tools and the training to say, hey, I love you so much and I believe in us that I want to work this out. And also to say, hey, like, I actually no longer want to be in this relationship. This is, and this is okay. And there is a restore, there is beauty and sadness and pain and also liberty and freedom in saying, we've had a good run and we do not need to be in relationship. And there is a good way. Um, to end a relationship. So I think that the idea of like bridging the divides, I think is really important. And also think it's really important to like we need to tend to our own garden. And if bridging the divide, um, if doing that work of bringing your apolitical uncle or your racist uncle into the other side is going to mess with your mental health or destroy you emotionally, or for to be honest, make you unsafe. Because if your father or your mother have different politics than you, that can be really unsafe for young people, right? You don't have to do that labor. We get to choose to do it. And restorative justice can be a way in which we can say, I want to bridge the divide, or we can say, that is not the work for me to do. Somebody else will do it. I will take care of my garden. I will leave the world a better place in the way that I feel like belongs to me, as opposed to this idea that like unless you make things work out, you're a failure. Unless you like stay in relationship, you're a failure. Like apologize, just make nice, make right. Um, or like agree to disagree. Um, and so there's some of us who um will be grateful for every relationship that we've lost over political disagreements, because in many ways, like I have found freedom as well as pain in not bridging the divide, in saying, if you don't see me as a human, I no longer want to be in relationship with you. And there's also some of us who will be find that same freedom in sitting down and struggling through it and agreeing to disagree and doing that labor. And I think that we all have our own path, and um, it is our duty to follow it.
Thank you so much for that, Martine. Youth keepers, anything to add? Or Logan, of course, you as well.
Well, yeah, I'd love to add something. I thought that was really well said, Martine. And also, I have been thinking a lot about that commitment aspect because I grew up in a household where if I wanted to leave a sport or something I was playing, it's the idea of like you committed to this, stick with it. So, commitment was very like important in our household, and so that's something that I really keep with me. But exactly as you've said, when you're in contact with people who are causing harm or who you have different political perspectives, and it's just not easy to communicate. And it sort of brings up that question of like, is this relationship still serving me? And is it all right for me to say goodbye to it, right? Like, I feel like that's a really challenging to like, what does that say about me if I, let go of this relationship? And so I I think that that's something too within restorative justice that's discussed a lot. And I was wondering what everyone else's perspectives were on like how often we're talking about how to uh, create space for the harmed party versus the how much space we create for the people who have caused harm. And we can also say victim or offender. I'm using the terms harmed party versus causing harm because this is what I've learned about. But yeah, do you think we hold enough space for the victim per se, or uh, do you think within restorative justice sometimes is there too much space for the people who cause harm, and or what do you think about that, and how have you seen balance take place in a good way?
I think that that's a great question in the sense of like, I think that like there is sometimes an imbalance between how much attention goes to um the harm party versus the offender, in the sense that I think that sometimes when so many people are coming in so strongly with their beliefs, it's so hard to kind of mitigate where, where that balance happens, because there are so many people coming in like hot and heavy saying like I support this side, and then there's so many people coming in saying I support this side, where sometimes it creates of verses of right and wrong, right? And so because everybody in this call has their own morals, right? And because people feel so strongly that they have to stick to these morals, it's such a difficult thing to kind of find, right? So, but I think at the end of the day, with restorative justice, I think that everybody comes together, and this goes back to unity, right? Everybody comes together, connects and unifies, so that we can all come in and kind of come to a consensus that, listen, we may not all agree on this one topic, but it is clear that we are all striving to get to the same goal, or at least somewhere around there, and we have to work together to get there, right? Because obviously two hands are better than one, right? Whereas like there's also just like great minds think alike, and it's like sometimes that doesn't happen, in the sense that sometimes we don't think alike. Like I can tell you countless of times that I've had a conversation with Martine or Josiah, and we have very different thought processes, right? And I think that it's so important to acknowledge that we're all coming from a different mindset, but it's important to come with an open mindset, no matter where you're coming from, right? And yeah, that's kind of how I feel about that.
Um, I totally agree with you. And that was like a different approach than what I was gonna say. And when I first heard the question, I was mainly I was thinking about who is more like who is more of heard in this situation, not necessarily who is more listened to, but more of who kind of has more leverage when the conversation starts, and who is believed to be trusted more when the conversation starts. And I kind of see that as, the person who is obviously the victim is obviously going to have more leverage once the conversation starts. But once you take a deeper dive into actually what was the reasoning behind, um, you know, don't want to say attacker, but can I say attacker? Is that fine? Yeah. Okay. Okay. I feel that, the attackers mainly, you kind of have to see it in the mindset of who is, why. You always have to ask why before you say, I'm sorry, I totally forgot what I was going to say. I'm sorry, I just blanked out. But you have to ask why the
You're asking, sorry, Josiah, excuse me. This is such an important point that you're making, and I want to just say thank you for it. And if I'm hearing you correctly, and anyone else chime in here, what you're pointing to is the why is maybe even the unseen story. Is that right? So what you're getting at maybe, and I'd love to hear more if you're willing and you got your train of thought back. What is so important about allowing space for the why to come to light?
Well, I am gonna say that, and thank you so much for that assist, because I definitely, like you did definitely point me in the right direction. Nice.
Oh,
And that where I was going. It was where you have to think about the other person, the opposition side, and why they chose to do this action, and what was the reason of them doing that. And in a lot of my situations, because I am going to use a personal reference now, in a lot of my situations where I would get into conflict, I was seen more of the aggressor, and I was seen more as the attacker. And I didn't like that, because it was like, oh, now you have these thoughts on you, these pre-assumed thoughts on you, that nobody has really taken a chance to get to know you, and they haven't seen you as a clean slate. They just see you as this person that they already know of, or, the person that they always see, oh, he's bad, da da da. And, not to say anybody's bad, but to say that you kind of have to come into it with a clean slate. You can't come into it as, oh, since this person is my friend or I like this person more, I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt and say they're right. You can't come into it as like that. You have to approach it as, oh, these are two people that I've never met before, and I'm going to approach it as I'm here to listen, and I'm here to listen to what they have to say and why they chose to do such thing or whatever they have done. I'm here to hear them. I'm not here to penalize them. I'm not here to judge them. I'm here to guide them in the way of, what's a resolution that you can have. And I think that's what restorative justice is overall. It's trying to find a resolution instead of, penalizing the person and telling them, oh, you're in the wrong, and giving them feedback upon what they can do next time. Let's hope there's no next time, but what they can do next time if they are placed in a situation such as this, and what's a different approach they can take.
Josiah, how do you articulate that to people that maybe you're facilitating a process for? Or is it more of a silent presence thing? Meaning you said something really huge. You're giving us a master class, all of you right now. But
It's kind of, go ahead.
sorry, one of the things that is really difficult for all of us, I think, as circle keepers is we're not there to assess or judge or diagnose, right?
Mhm.
And that's such a beautiful point that you're making. So how do we build that confidence? Is it verbal, nonverbal, both? How does that work with the people that we're working with? Or for you, in observing that people already had pre-existing assumptions about you that are unjust.
Right. Um, you know, I think that when it's kind of like I'm trying to like explain it in simpler terms. It's kind of like, oh, I'm not here to tell you the answer. I'm here to guide you to that answer. I'm here as your guide. I'm not here as your fortune teller. I'm not here to tell you what you're going to do. I'm here to guide you in what to do. And I think that's where a lot of things take a turn and it guides away from restorative justice and it kind of turns into, oh, you're going to do this. You're going to have to do this in order to make up for this. No, you want the person to come up with their own solution and their own resolution and to change. You don't want to just tell them, oh, you're going to do this, you're going to do this. You want to help them, but you don't want to tell them. So, yeah.
Yeah, just to say something, just I think a good way to explain what you're trying to say is like hurt people. You know that expression? Yes, yes. Like, people aren't gonna cause harm or cause a lot of harm if they are perfectly happy, right? So there's always something going on with the other side, and that's why, like just I said, you gotta look at both sides. Yeah, that's all.
I kind of want to add on to that. I just heard like such beautiful points. I think that um, I became a peer mediator in my school in seventh grade, I believe it was. Um, and I had been exploring the idea of peer mediation since sixth. So when I became a peer mediator, something that my guides were strongly enforcing was that you are not there to tell them the solution. You are there to help them come to a resolution, right? Rather than trying to tell them that this is what needs to happen, rather than one second. Sorry. You guys like need to look at it from both perspectives of, okay, this party is harmed by something that the other party did, right? And so the harmed and unharmed party have to come together and say, listen, this is what I think our next steps are, right? because the mediator isn't there to tell you what to do or to tell you how to go about your next steps, right? A mediator is there to guide you in what you think your beliefs are and what you believe so strongly, right? And this goes back to we all have such different and strong morals that we believe that we need to go by. And everybody should feel comfortable to go by those morals in a situation like that. So I just wanted to like kind of tie that in with like what Orla and Josiah said, because those were two beautiful points.
Thank you. What's the relationship? I know that there's a couple of us that need to slip out here in a moment. So just honoring that space with deep gratitude. We'll continue for a little bit longer after that. But just again, we're with the Circle Keepers and really encouraging everyone to check out their work at thecirclekeepers.com. A lot of active events and opportunities for engagement, no matter whether you're in the New York area or not, online, on the ground, lots of momentum building, and an excellent example of community held restorative practices, both in schools, but as I think Josiah, you specifically noted, you're really looking also to move into courts and to support the justice system itself. But let me just back up, and I know a couple of us have to leave. So, in a nutshell, does anybody want to respond to what you see to be the interrelationship between acknowledgement and belonging? And also the subcategories maybe would be being seen, being heard, being understood even. So what is the relationship between those two, and how do you feel those fit in with what we offer as keepers? And is that a universal human need to you?
I know I'm talking a lot, sorry. But I want to add to that in the sense of I think that the first step is acknowledging what you need, right? It's acknowledging what you need out of a relationship, right? And it's acknowledging what you need out of whether it's a random relationship or someone that you have a conversation with every now and then, right? It's acknowledging what you need and what that other person needs, right? Um, I think that it's so interconnected because of the fact that our necessities are going to be there regardless of, what you want, right? Necessities are always going to be there, and there's always going to be a set of necessities that you're going to communicate with others and say, I need this, right? And so from that, you kind of get to work into being acknowledged and being heard and being seen, which I think is a basic should be a basic necessity and have of everybody, right? Um, I think that like when you sit down and acknowledge what you need, then you're able to go about how you want to be acknowledged, right? How you want to be talked to, how you want to be respected, right? Because restorative justice is also about respect, right? It's respect among others and among ourselves, right? And to have justice, we need to have respect for one another. And I think that everything is so interconnected and so like just kind of glued because it's like you can see constantly how these multiple factors and pieces work together to make these factors work no matter what they are. So yeah.
So, question on that note.
Mm-hmm.
Safety. All right. That's a word that gets tossed around kind of lightly in the RJ field.
Mm-hmm.
But what is it actualized and how does it support cultivating the ability for someone to acknowledge what they need?
Well, I think that safety is so important. To me, safety is one of my biggest concerns, whether it be with relationships with in school, in other like just other contexts. Safety is always up here for me. Um, when you realize how you feel comfortable and safe and what makes you feel comfortable and safe, be it a person or an environment, you need to be able to communicate that. And I think that's one of the biggest thing in the RJ world is communication, right? Because if you don't communicate those needs, you're not going to be able to feel safe with others or sometimes even yourself. Because if you yourself don't realize how you feel safe and how you feel recognized, heard, and comfortable, then it's going to be so hard to communicate with others, you know, on how what you need. So yeah,
Is safety something that we tell others the definition of, or is it something we find together?
we find together. It's such a learning experience. You cannot signify safety to yourself because it's such a learning experience that others need to be able to like be a part of, especially those you are close to and those who you want to build a relationship with.
I love the way that you phrased that, Elena. And I wanted to add on to to Molly's question about um, who defines what safety is. I think when we think about, say, school safety agents, as me and Martine have been working away from as a part of like the Dignity in Schools campaign, right? And when we think about the phrase school safety agent, it has the word safety in it, like it's supposed to make us more safe, and it's supposed to keep our community safe when actuality, they don't really, right? Because they're the ones that are contributing to the school to prison pipeline. But they try to define what safety is for us. Um, when, like Elena said, we need to come up with our definition of safety as a collective, whether that be, having more mental health resources in our schools or, having that sense of belonging and acknowledgement among your peers. That is our way of defining our safety, and it is not something for, the DOE or some outside party who's trying to add more policing into our schools to define for us. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important specifically for us who practice restorative justice to always be grounded on like anti-racism and anti-bias, but specifically to make the connections between both the indigenous and Black epistemologies and ontologies that run and that drive restorative justice, restorative practices, right? So, like when we're talking about Chief Justice Robert Yazzie, when we're talking about the Navajo peoples, when we're talking about circle, we don't mean it as a metaphor, right? We mean it as an actual thing that happens and an actual thing that is truth. And so, in looking at all definitions, in a white supremacist, capitalist, militaristic, white supremacist, patriarchal society, as bell hooks teaches us, are going to be defined by those dominant cultures, right? So who gets to say what is safe um, is important, and also equally important is who gets to silence, right? Uh, we over the last few years, but really for a long time, we've been hearing how trans women using women's bathrooms is not safe, right? So when we're talking about when the system, specifically school systems, talk about safety, quote unquote, it's good for us to remember that schools in this country were part of how white supremacist dominant ideologies were expanded, right? Like the education, the schooling project in this country is a cannot be separated from the theft of the lands from Native Americans and from the enslavement of enslaved Africans. Those go hand in hand, right? Um, and the silence of the church and the like later on the oligarchs and later on like so in capitalism, right? And like the way of making money and the widget makers. So it's important that when we talk about restorative justice, we don't talk about restorative justice like as a kumbaya or as a woo, let's all shake hands, um, whatever, let's just move through it. But actually to be reminded that I think also I'm like tying together some quotes. But like Kazu Haga says, like all conflict is historical, right? Conflicts have a history, and we cannot separate the uh, anti-black racism and violence aided and abetted and excused by the state. And in so many ways, like teachers are also part of the state. Deans and administrators are part of the state. Like the school is part of the state. So those of us who practice restorative justice in schools have to be aware that we are also part of that policing system. And so we have to allow the youth um, to define what safety means for them because they are the ones who are experiencing it day in and day out.
Mm. Thoughts from our youth teachers present on that incredible statement. What resounds for you with what Martine put forward? We're diving in deep tonight, folks. Thanks for being with us, by the way, all of you wonderful listeners and community members of the Global Restorative Justice on the Rise Network. We want to give a shout out to the Instagram account, which is very active and popular in Insta world for Circle Keepers. And that address, that handle is the Circle Keepers. So just like their website address, which is the circlekeepers.com, just put an A sign, whatever they call that. Excuse me, I forgot the word for the handle at Insta. Very active account there. Please pass this work along, spread the word. And I know that annual conference is going to be happening again every year, but you have other things that you're up to. We'll keep on this note for another moment, but I'd love to also turn to active events you'd like to share about, a little bit about music and creativity in the spaces that you offer and that you convene. But let's get back to what Martine shared a moment ago.
Um, yeah, I'll definitely add on, well, kind of connect back to what Martin was saying about how, you know, be as restorative justice, as we practice restorative justice in schools, that means we kind of are part of the state and we kind of we're part of the school system. We were part of those policing properties now because we're we're using we're kind of introducing that and we're kind of taking it and we're trying to introduce it into the state and we're trying to introduce that and it is good to do that, but then that also means we're part of the revolution and now we're trying to introduce and be part of the state-owned school, because if you think about it, it's not a city-owned school. New York City public schools aren't owned by the city. It's owned by the state. It's not owned by the city. Although it might say that it's owned by the state, it's owned by the city, actually. So we have to, oh, whoa, sorry, switch that around. Although it might say that it's owned by the city, it's owned by the state. Sorry, I mixed that up. But he was saying that we're part of the policing process because now we have to follow those rules. We can't not make up our own rules, but we have to align with their properties now because the DOE does have rules that they want us to follow in order to police us. That's how they police it. So we have to follow those rules in order so we can police others.
I think that was really well said. I think that another point that I like to focus on when I dive into these type of topics is that letting kids find their own definition of safety is so important. And I can't stress that enough because I think that it's so interesting to see how like we are constantly evolving as a society, and it seems that it's kind of like one step forward, two steps back. It always just seems like that give and take idea, right? Because it seems that we go back 100 years, right, and we see all of this stuff happening, right, in the school systems, and you see that it's not much different from what's going on today, right? It's a repetition of what's happened in the past, which Martine mentioned. And I think that it's so important to acknowledge that this has all been done before, right? Now, our job is to find ways to solve it, right? It's to find ways to make sure that we don't repeat it again in 100 years, right? It's to make sure that we're breaking those generational barriers and curses, right? Because ultimately, it seems that that is what is holding us back each and every time we go through it again, right? At this time, we are at such an interesting state as, as a society and as a world in general. And it is so easy to go back to a process that we were doing 100 years ago in the snap of a finger, right? And it's important to acknowledge that we need to we need to move on, and we need to move forward, not even move on, move forward, so that we can progress, not with technology, not with our surroundings and how it looks, but with how we are interconnected and how we treat each other and how we view each other, right? Because just like Josiah said, we cannot go into a conversation, or we cannot go into an interaction with a pre-biased opinion, or an idea of what that person is before you've even interacted with them, right? And that plays into everybody's life, teen life, kid life, adult life. That plays into everybody's life. And it is so important to realize that we need, as a society, to move forward and not get stuck on this idea, if that makes sense. I think that we are so stuck on the traditions that we hold, or what we've done in the past, or constantly, but we need to make new traditions, we need to make new patterns, we need to make new solutions. And I think that is so important, in my eyes, and I hope in other youth's eyes and adults' eyes.
I think that that statement concludes this session. What a powerful way to wrap up. I want to invite everyone to add, but I just want to say, there you go. That's why we called this session The Youth Are Not the Problem. The youth are the solution and towards healing and restoration in schools, by youth, and for youth.
And so we would like to end with a little chant. I'll say the first part, and then the young people can see the second part. The youth are not the problem, the youth are the solution.
Safe, supportive schools. That's our revolution.
Sorry, can we do that again? I feel like our hearts weren't really in it.
Yeah,
Oh,
let's
yeah.
do it again. The youth are not the problem, the youth are the solution.
Safe,
Safe,
supportive
supportive
schools.
schools are the
That's our
resolution.
revolution.
Revolution.
The out of thinkness is bringing some PTSD from Zoom school. Y'all are too young to remember Zoom school, but I remember teaching ninth grade during Zoom school, and that's all I got. So part of me really loves that little out of sync chanting. But thank you so much for Restorative Justice on the Rise. Everybody, give it snaps. Um, one of the things that is important to speak about is like the folks who hold historical knowledge about something, like having been a teacher for the last 20 years. I feel like now I'm becoming an elder in education, and it's really beautiful. And so knowing that, Molly, you're doing so much restorative justice education for such a long time, um and it is not an easy thing. And so we want to thank you and thank Logan for interning, and we'll make sure that we'll plug in your info on our site. And I
Thank
want to
you.
give a big thank you to the youth. The youth are always, this is their summer break. and they're still doing this. So some of us are going to be doing a little restorative justice training on Friday. So we're excited. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. And thank you for standing for the power of restorative justice advocacy through podcasting, through panels, through events that give the voice back. And I hope you felt like you had the mic on you, a chance to be heard and to really state where you feel this movement has hope, and where our challenges are. Tonight has been very special for me. I'm always learning. I may have been in this for a while, but I am with you and alongside you, still learning. And I just also want to thank Logan Ward for being co-host with me tonight alongside and with you. Please check out his film Remarkable. Check him out on Instagram as well. I can't thank Logan enough for coming on to the Restorative Justice on the Rise collaborative team to put forward these efforts to shine light on programs like Circle Keepers. Finally, Restorative Justice on the Rise.org is on Apple and Spotify. We're also on Insta. We'd love to interact with you and hear your feedback. We're going to plan a session 2 with this team in the very near future. So keep your eyes peeled, ears open, and of course, listen from the heart. Thank you, everybody, so much. We'll see you next time.
Thank you,
It was
folks.
a pleasure. Have a good night.
Great
Thank
to